This is the first lesson in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy's Latin Grammar 1 course. And in this course, I'm going to teach the Latin grammar of Emmanuel Alvarez. Emmanuel Alvarez was a Jesuit minister and schoolmaster who lived in the 1500s. He joined the Jesuits in 1546, right at the time of the development of the Protestant Reformation. And he was a schoolmaster, as I said, and he developed and taught a complete system of Latin grammar that became the standard textbook in the schools of the Jesuits in the 15 and 16 and 1700s. The Jesuits published a book that was called the Ratio Studiorum, in which they lay out the whole plan for the education of students in their classical Catholic schools back in the 15 and 1600s. And this textbook that we're going to be studying in this course is the textbook that was used in those traditional or classical Catholic schools. So we're going to go through it lesson by lesson throughout this whole course. In Latin Grammar 1, we're going to study Book 1, which is the study of Latin etymology, or the forms and cases of the figures of speech. And then in Latin Grammar 2, we're going to study Book 2, which teaches the syntax of Latin, that is the rules of constructing sentences in Latin. And then in Latin Grammar 3, we're going to study Book 3 of Alvarez's grammar, which teaches the rules of Latin prosody, which gets us into Latin poetry and more perfect pronunciation and things like that. So we're going to start in each lesson. I'm going to teach you the translation of the original Latin text of Alvarez's grammar. I'm going to do that for a couple of reasons. First of all, the Latin was intended to be studied and memorized by students. It's written very clearly and simply. And secondly, it's good for you to be immersed in Latin translation and reading so you can hear the sounds of the language, see the language, learn vocabulary, and so on. Once we get through this first lesson, which is on the letters of the Latin alphabet, once you learn the correct pronunciation and the letters and the diphthongs, you should be able to begin Latin Reading 1, studying the Latin translation of the Gospel of John. So that's an introduction to Latin Grammar 1. Now we're going to walk through Lesson 1, which the title is De Literis, which means about letters or of letters. So our first chapter is a study De Literis, of letters. I'm going to read the rules out of Alvarez's text in Latin and translate them as I go. It'll be good for you to watch this video as you read the lesson that's printed in text so you can see the words and the translation. But you can watch this video as many times as you'd like to. So the first time, you can just relax and watch and listen as we go through the first lesson, and then use it to help you study your lesson for mastery afterwards. Okay, so Lesson 1 of Latin Grammar 1 from the textbook of the Jesuit schoolmaster Emmanuel Alvarez. Chapter 1, De Literis, of letters. Alvarez writes, Litere quibus utuntur Latini sunt tres et viginti. Litere, the letters, quibus utuntur Latini, which the Latins used, sunt tres et viginti, are 3 and 20. The letters which the Latins used are 3 and 20. That's the first rule. 3 and 20 is the Latin way of saying 23. So there are 23 letters in Latin. Litere quibus utuntur Latini sunt tres et viginti. And then, as you'll see in your lesson, Alvarez gives us a list of the names of the Latin letters. And I'll read them so you can learn how to pronounce them correctly. And I'll make a few comments as we go. The 23 Latin letters are A, B, Che or Ke, depending on if you use classical pronunciation, Ke, or Christian pronunciation, Che. Then we have De, E, F. Then we have Je in Christian pronunciation, or Ge in classical pronunciation. Ha, I, Kappa. Kappa is also called Ka in some textbooks. Kappa, L, M, N, O, P. Q, R, S, T, U, X, Y, and Zeta. So the alphabet in Latin is very similar to English, and the pronunciation is very similar also. Now, as I mentioned, there are two different pronunciations in Latin, but don't think that these are two clear, different systems of pronunciation. What happened was, classical pronunciation is the original true Roman pronunciation of the Latin language. Over time, as the Roman Empire eventually collapsed, as Latin spread through all of Europe as the official language of the church, of universities, of governments, and different institutions like that, the Latin language was sort of blended with the languages of those different places, the pronunciation that they used, things like that. So the Latin, the original pure classical Latin, eventually started to take on some other sounds and pronunciations. And so when we talk about Christian or ecclesiastical Latin, it's simply a Latin that was used later in mostly Christian countries in Europe that's a little bit different from the original classical Latin. Classical Latin would be better to study and focus on because it's simple. There's very simple pronunciation, whereas ecclesiastical Latin gets a little bit more complicated, okay? In classical Latin, there's one sound for every letter, and it's just that simple. In ecclesiastical Latin, we may have one sound that can be written in a number of different ways, and it creates some confusion for children getting started. But we're going to learn both as we study Latin, because anytime that we read the writings of a Roman author, we're going to read his writing with classical pronunciation because that was his pronunciation. And when we read the writings of Christian authors later in history, we're going to read their works with a Christian pronunciation because that was more of their sound of the language when they wrote. And so it's important to always read an author with a pronunciation that was more likely his own at the time when he was writing. So in that first rule, we learn there are 23 Latin letters, and we learn their names, okay? The sounds of these letters in Old Classical Latin have one sound for each. And as I said, the letter Ke, the third letter of the alphabet, A, B, Ke in Classical Latin, is always pronounced with the hard K sound. And then the letter Ge, the letter Ge in Classical Latin always has that hard G sound. The only other thing I'd like to note is the letter upsilon. We're going to learn in a little bit that the letter upsilon is actually a Greek letter. Another name for the upsilon is Y, which means the Greek Y or the Greek I. So upsilon can have another name, y. That's it for the 23 Latin letters. So up here on the board, I just have summaries of these rules. Rule number 1, literae or litere sunt tres et viginti. The letters of Latin are 3 and 20. And again, just to clarify pronunciation, in Christian pronunciation, this is read litere sunt tres et viginti. And now listen to this as I read the same sentence with classical pronunciation and notice the differences. Literae sunt tres et viginti. Viginti. Okay? So we're going to see that there are differences in the pronunciation, but they're really not a big deal. And we're not going to make a big fuss about these differences as we get started. We'll talk about them when it's important, when it's worth noting. When we do our Latin readings, you'll be able to hear the pronunciation, and it's not going to be something we struggle with. We don't need to spend a lot of time talking about pronunciation. But I'll read most often with just modern Christian pronunciation. Litere sunt tres et viginti. The letters are 3 and 20. Okay? Rule number 2. I'll read the actual rule from your lesson. Litere dividuntur in vocales et consonantes. Litere dividuntur in vocales et consonantes. The letters, literae or litere, the letters dividuntur are divided. The letters are divided into vocales, vowels, et, and consonantes, consonants. The letters of the Latin language are divided into vowels and consonants. That's simple enough. Same is true of English. Okay, the letters are 23 in number, and they're divided into vowels and consonants. Rule number 3. Vocales sunt 6. Vocales sunt 6. The vowels are 6. Sorry. The vowels are 6. We can also read this as there are 6 vowels. Okay? The vowels are 6. And then we have the 6 vowels listed here. Their names in Latin are a, e, I, o, u, and upsilon. A, e, I, o, u, upsilon. Okay? Then the lesson goes on to say, quarum ultima tantum in dictionibus Grecis locum habet. What that says is, first we learn that the vowels are 6 in number, a, e, I, o, u, and upsilon. And then the rule says, of which 6 vowels, quarum, of which, ultima, the last, tantum in dictionibus Grecis, only in Greek words, locum habet, has a place. The last vowel, upsilon, only has a place in Greek words. And what that means is, in Latin, if there's a word that was taken directly from Greek into Latin, it may have the letter upsilon in that word. That's the only time the letter or the vowel upsilon is used in Latin, is when it's in a Greek word that was brought into Latin. And your lesson gives you 2 examples of this. The first example is the name Hieronymus. Hieronymus. And here we see that upsilon, Hieronymus, this is the Greek name for Jerome. And we can see that this Greek word was just brought directly into Latin. It has an upsilon in it, and that's how the letter upsilon comes into Latin. Okay, it is considered a Latin vowel, one of the 6 Latin vowels, but it's really not a Latin vowel. It's really a Greek vowel used in Latin. The other example that your lesson gives you is Dionysios. Dionysios. It's got an upsilon in that third to last syllable. Dionysios. Okay? So there are 6 vowels in Latin: a, e, I, o, u, and upsilon. Now, since there are 6 vowels and there are 23 letters, that means that there are 17 consonants. Okay? The letters divide or are divided into vowels and consonants. There are 6 vowels, therefore there must be 17 consonants in Latin. Rule number 4 in your lesson says, cetere appellantur consonantes. Cetere appellantur consonantes. Cetere means the other ones, or the rest, those remaining. The vowels are 6. Cetere, the rest, are consonantes. Vocantur, your lesson says, are called consonantes, consonants. Okay? Cetere appellantur consonantes, quod vocalibus iuncte simul sonent. Quod, which, the rest are called consonants, which vocalibus iuncte simul sonent, which with vowels or 2 vowels, iuncte, joined, simul, together with, sonent, make a sound. The rest of the letters are consonants, which, when joined together with vowels, make a sound. So consonants, the word consonantes, con means together with, and sonantes means sounding. And so a consonant is a sound that must be spoken with a vowel. The rest of the letters are consonants which, with or 2 vowels, joined together, sonent, make a sound. All right? So there are 17 consonants which are sounded when they are joined together with vowels. Rule number 5. Rule number 5, your lesson reads, syllaba fit ex literis una vel pluribus. Syllaba fit ex literis una vel pluribus. Syllaba means a syllable. Fit means is made. Ex literis. A syllable is made out of or from letters. A syllable is made of letters. Una vel pluribus. 1 letter or more than 1 letter. Multiple letters. Okay, so a syllable is made of letters. A syllable can be made of only 1 letter, or a syllable can be made of more than 1 letter. And then your lesson gives you a few examples. First, we have this word alias. Alias, which means a risk or a chance that's taken. Alias. We see that the word alias divides into 3 syllables. 1, 2, 3. A, le, as. The first syllable is made up of only 1 letter, a. And then the next 2 syllables are each made up of 2 letters, a, le, as. Okay, so here's a word made up of 3 syllables, and the first syllable is made up of 1 letter, the other syllables more than one letter. That's what the lesson teaches. Syllaba fit ex literis una vel pluribus. That's rule number 5. Rule number 6 continues to teach us about syllables. We read syllaba quae fit ex duabus vocalibus vocator diphthongus. Syllaba quae fit ex duabus vocalibus vocator diphthongus. Syllaba, a syllable made ex duabus vocalibus, from 2 vowels, vocator, is called diphthongus, a diphthong. A syllable made of 2 vowels, vocator, is called diphthongus, a diphthong. A diphthong, as the rule teaches us, is a syllable, one syllable, which contains 2 vowel sounds. This word diphthongus comes from Greek. And if you take Greek grammar, we study this in, I think it's lesson 2. The Greek word dis means double, and the Greek word phthongoi, strange word, means sounds, double sounds. A diphthong is a syllable that's made of 2 vowels, all right? 2 vowels that's treated as one syllable. The reason why that's important is because normally every vowel that we read makes a syllable, okay? Every vowel makes a syllable. If we look at the word aleas, we have 1, 2, 3 vowels, and we have 1, 2, 3 syllables. 1 syllable for each vowel. So in a diphthong, we're going to have 2 vowels, but they're going to be treated as only 1 syllable. And when we have that, when we have a syllable made of 2 vowel sounds, that's a diphthong. Now, the way that we know a diphthong is by simply memorizing them. We memorize the diphthongs in Latin, and then when we see them, we know that it's a diphthong. Okay, the next rule, rule number 7, tells us what the diphthongs are in Latin. Diphthongi, or diphthongi, sunt 6. Diphthongi sunt 6. The diphthongs in Latin are 6. And then we have a list of the 6 Latin diphthongs. The first is a, e, which in classical Latin is pronounced I. A, e. You can hear the 2 sounds together. A, e, I. 2 vowel sounds in 1 syllable. The second diphthong is a, u. A, u. We put those 2 sounds together in 1 syllable and make the diphthong ow, ow, ow. That's the second Latin diphthong. The third Latin diphthong is e, e. E, e. We put those sounds together in 1 syllable and make the diphthong a, a, a. Then we have e, u, e, u. We put those together and make ew, ew, ew. 1 syllable, 2 vowel sounds. Next we have o, e, o, e. Put those 2 sounds together and we make oi, oi, oi. And lastly, we have upsilon and e, upsilon and e. And we put those 2 sounds together and we have we, ui, ui. Okay? These are the 6 Latin diphthongs. Now, in church or Christian pronunciation, these are a little bit different. The first diphthong here in church pronunciation is not I, but simply e, e, e. And the diphthong oi, oi, is also in church pronunciation just e, e. And you can see that that brings some confusion in with church pronunciation, because we no longer have simple rules where there are 2 letters and 2 sounds, and 2 letters and 2 sounds. In church Latin, we have 2 letters, but just 1 sound. 2 different letters and the same sound. So you see that the confusion in pronunciation actually comes through the church Latin. So if we learn grammar with classical pronunciation, learning the rules and things like that will be much simpler. So the right way to do this is to learn everything using classical pronunciation, memorize it like that so we can easily remember it, but then also learn how the sounds change later in history when the church uses the language throughout Europe. So just to review real quick, the 6 Latin diphthongs using classical pronunciation: I, au, e, eu, oi, ui. 6 Latin diphthongs. Now using Christian or church pronunciation: e, au, e, eu, e, ui. Okay? Diphthongi sunt 6. There are 6 diphthongs. Your lesson, printed lesson, also gives you an example for each of these diphthongs. Each of those words has the diphthong in it. Make sure you can find the diphthong in each of those Latin words. Remember, anytime we see these combinations of vowels, we treat them as 1 syllable, because there are special combinations that are called diphthongs. Okay, special syllables made up of 2 vowels. Now, in our languages, we'll sometimes see a place where these 2 letters are together, but they are not a diphthong. They're not to be read together. When that happens, we'll use a symbol. So if we see these 2 letters in Latin, we would say, oh, that's au, that's a diphthong. But there are some times when it's actually not a diphthong, and what will happen is the printer will put 2 dots over the first vowel. And what those 2 dots mean is that we should read these as 2 separate syllables. So instead of saying au, we need to make it clear that this is a, u. Okay? Anytime that these pairs of letters are not to be read in 1 syllable, it'll be marked by this symbol of 2 dots above the first vowel. Okay? But anytime you see these normally in Latin, almost always in Latin, you're going to read these combinations, these diphthongs, as 2 sounds in 1 syllable. Okay? The last 2 rules are very simple. Dictio fit e syllabis ut aleas. Dictio fit e syllabis. Dictio. This is the Latin word for word, like a dictionary is a book where we seek the pronunciation and meanings of words. Dictio is a Latin word for word. Dictio fit e syllabis. A word is made out of syllables. Syllaba fit ex literis. A syllable is made out of letters. Dictio fit e syllabis. A word is made out of syllables. Now notice right here, just a quick note. Here we have syllaba fit ex. Ex. And here we have dictio fit e syllabis. This preposition ex means out of or from. When the word that follows ex can easily be pronounced after that X sound, the X stays in the preposition. So ex literis is easy to say, ex literis. But when it would be difficult to say the X sound followed by the sound of the next word, the X is simply dropped and we say e. So e and X are two different forms of the same Latin word. All right? Sometimes you'll see e, sometimes you'll see X, but they're the same words. Dictio fit e syllabis. A word is made out of syllables. And we have two examples here. Your lesson goes on to say interdum fit ex una syllaba. So a word is made of syllables, but sometimes a word can be made of just one syllable. And we have two examples in the lesson. Aleas, which we've seen before. Aleas is a word that's made of 3 syllables. But mors, which means death, mors is a word made of only 1 syllable. So a word is made of syllables. Sometimes interdum fit ex una syllaba, but sometimes a word is made of 1 syllable, like mors. Okay? And then the last rule in this lesson, oratio fit ex dictionibus. Oratio, speech, fit is made ex out of dictionibus. Dictionibus. And dictionibus is a form of dictio. So let's review. Syllaba fit ex literis. A syllable is made out of letters. Dictio fit e syllabis. A word is made out of syllables. And lastly, oratio fit ex dictionibus. A speech fit is made out of dictionibus, words. Speech is made out of words. Syllaba fit ex literis. A syllable is made out of letters. Dictio fit e syllabis. A word is made out of syllables. Oratio fit ex dictionibus. A speech is made of words. And we're given 2 examples. 2 simple examples. Aleas fuge. I told you before that aleas means a risk or chance. It can also be used to mean certain games of chance, like playing dice or gambling. And this sentence here, aleas fuge. Fuge means to run away from something or flee. Fuge aleas means to flee risks or flee chance, or it could mean flee certain kinds of games. Aleas fuge. That's an example of oratio, speech or sentence. And then secondly, we have mortem meditare. Mortem meditare. I told you mors means death. Mortem is another form of that same word. It means death. And meditare means to meditate on or be mindful of something. So morte meditare means think about death or be mindful of your death. In other words, be humble and careful to fear and obey God because you're going to die. So 2 examples of orationes. Alias fuge, flee risk or flee games maybe. Mortem meditare, be mindful of death. That's all of the content of lesson 1. There are 9 rules to learn. I hope you can see that the Latin, although it may be new, is not difficult to follow and read. It was written to be easy enough for students to learn who obviously don't know Latin. And so in your lesson, I'm going to put the Latin text, the translation of the Latin text, and I'd like you to memorize these Latin rules. They're very simple, and memorization is good because it gives us a way to measure your work as a student. Memorization is just simple work. No one can complain and say that they can't memorize because even animals can memorize things. Memory is not some kind of great power that people have. It's a simple human animal power. And when we memorize, we can prove that we've worked. And people who don't like to memorize are usually students who just don't like to work. They don't like memorization because memorization allows us to test whether or not a student did his work. I'd like you, not these, because these are just summaries of the rules, but the rules in your lesson. I'd like you to memorize the Latin rule. I'd like you to know the translation and the meaning of each Latin rule, and then make sure you learn the names of all the letters, the 6 Latin vowels, the 6 Latin diphthongs, and so on. That's the goal of this first lesson. Basic Latin orthography, the parts of words, and once we're through that, we'll move on to lesson 2, where we get into the parts of speech. The parts of speech. Partes orationis. Here we're learning the parts of words, letters, and syllables and diphthongs. In the next lesson, we're going to study oratio and learn the parts of speech, or partes orationis. Okay? We also discussed the different pronunciations, classical and church pronunciation. And I told you that while I'm going to read this normally with Christian pronunciation, when you learn the sounds of the letters, the sounds of the diphthongs, if you practice and memorize them with classical pronunciation, it will make it easier for you because there's only one sound per letter, but you need to make sure that you understand both. I'm going to stop this video here. It's pretty long, already 37 minutes long. So we're going to stop here, and what I'm going to say is now it's time for you, the student, to get to work. You can watch this video as many times as you'd like. Study the written lesson in your course online. And if you have any questions, or even if you just want more information about any of these issues, write me your questions. You can post them on the student forum. You can create a ticket, send us a message. Anything you'd like to know more about or need help with, it's your job as a student to seek the knowledge and mastery of these lessons. I, as a tutor or teacher, am here to help, but I can't do that work for you. So you have to study for mastery, complete your assessments, reach out for help when you need it, and we'll help you as much as you're willing to work. We'll help you to master and learn the Latin language. I hope that's a helpful introduction. Time for you to get to work. God bless your studies.